Guys, back here on the Fox 5 Live Zone, you are taking a live look at the White House. Looks so peaceful, calm, serene. That's not the case of I-95, New Jersey Turnpike to New York City, where former President Trump now back in the courtroom. Yes, it's the hush money criminal trial. And earlier today, all eyes focused on that courtroom as the woman at the center of attention took the stand. None other than Stormy Daniels. So what did she have to say, and what do we think the jury's response to what she had to say? We're going to break it all down for you. Joining us now is Michelle Thomas, prominent D.C. attorney and, well, shall I say, managing partner, and kind enough to join us back here on the Live Zone. Michelle, good to see you. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, a lot of fireworks already, Michelle. I got to tell you, as I prepared for the show, I got sidetracked here and there because I just wanted to listen to the transcripts, if you will, of what happened to be taking place inside the courtroom. Of course, today, the woman at the center of attention, Stormy Daniels, took the stand, and immediately the prosecution tried to paint a picture of her credibility, asking her how she got into the business and how she met President Trump and what they did once they met. So is that the whole goal of the, let's say, prosecution, to really make sure that she's somewhat credible?
So what the prosecution is doing is getting ahead of the story. They know that the defense is going to come in and essentially tear her credibility apart. She, on the surface, is not a very credible person. So they are essentially trying to rehabilitate her on the front end before the jury even hears from her, so that when she starts talking about it, she's been doing, detailing the hush money payments and her interaction with the defendant, it bolsters her credibility, and so the jury can sort of take it more seriously. So they had to start with rehabilitating her credibility just because of the history of the situation.
Yeah, and how key is it when it involves the details? I mean, as I stated, I happen to be paying attention, and I heard her state that she walked into the hotel room. She described how big that hotel room happened to be, stating the room alone is bigger than the first 3 houses that she owned. She also stated that at one point, former President Trump walked out dressed in satin pajamas, things that, quite honestly, one would have to actually be there and or lie under oath in order to dictate and or say.
I think most trial lawyers would say that generally the more detailed the story or the narrative is, the more believable it is, because who can recall and create and be consistent with those kinds of details? And so what she did was essentially paint the picture for the jury to be able to envision themselves, her with Mr. Trump, in those environments, which again makes it all the more believable to the jury. So those details were really important, and the prosecution, they're taking their time and laying that foundation, again, ultimately to bolster her credibility and make her entire story more believable.
Yeah, and as I like to say, let's do the remix. And the remix is that the defense at some point will likely cross-examine and or, let's say, have their own take on all of this. What picture will they try to paint of her?
They will destroy or attempt to destroy her credibility by saying she was in it for the money. And that's evident by the fact that she received, by her own admission, this $130,000 quote unquote hush money payment. The fact that she was looking to shop her story around paints a picture of someone trying to take advantage of the defendant and his celebrity and status and stature. And so I think the defense is going to hone in on that and really hammer the point home that she's about the money, and therefore you really can't believe her.
Yeah, with regard to former President Trump, which I find somewhat interesting, is that he denies any of this happens at all, or happened rather, at all. And so is it fair to say it's his credibility versus her credibility? Is that what it all comes down to?
Absolutely, regarding this hush money payment. And I don't know that that was the best strategy for this defendant, to deny it in its entirety versus taking ownership over it and saying he wanted to save his and protect his family. But yes, the jury is going to have to make a decision as to whose story to believe. Now, they may not hear directly from the defendant, who is unlikely to testify in this criminal trial, but essentially they are putting her story versus the narrative his lawyers are painting through cross-examination and the witnesses they'll call, and they'll have to make a judgment call here.
So how much does empathy play a role in all of this? I'm curious. I've quite honestly never been a part of a jury. And so I'm wondering, with regard to the prosecution, we all know that if this did indeed happen, once again, I stated if, that perhaps it took place just months after former President Trump's last son was born, and just after Melania actually gave birth. And so does the jury look at something like that saying, well, how could somebody do that? Does that all play into the credibility aspect, or is that completely doesn't matter at all?
Well, look, the jury is comprised of people. And people have empathy and they can feel, for someone in those situations. It may even bolster the defendant's story that he was trying to protect his wife, who had just become a mother, and his newborn son. And so I do think it plays a role. The jury looks at both, not just the facts themselves and the evidence, but the witness credibility, the mannerisms, the demeanor, and certainly any emotionalism that's portrayed by the witnesses and or the defendant. So all of that comes into play when a jury is ultimately deciding who to believe.
And so ultimately, is it fair to say that perhaps this is the day that we will truly indeed find out as to whether or not President Trump keeps that gag order in place? I would assume with one of the star witnesses, if you will, or the woman at the center of attention, Stormy Daniels, taking the stand, that the former president might want to have something to say following that.
Yeah, today, after the hearing today, that's going to be the most difficult and challenging, I think, component or time for this president, because he wants to refute her allegations. He wants to take that microphone as soon as they get out of court and tell the public that she was lying. If he does that, he will likely end up in jail. And so he is going to have to exercise self-restraint and composure and keep his thoughts to himself. And that's going to be really challenging for this defendant to do.
Yeah, every day we have been touching on that possibility of him actually having to venture into a jail cell. I'm curious, your take on that. Do you really think that's likely to happen?
I think that if he does it one more time and violates the gag order one more time, the court is going to have no choice but to lock him up, though it may only be for a few hours or maybe one night. I wouldn't expect it in a sense of term, but the court has to maintain the integrity of the court and the authority of the court. And so he cannot allow violation after violation with impunity.
Yeah, gosh, I got to tell you, as I say every day, this is like a movie playing out right before our very eyes, and something we will have to continue to keep a very close eye on. Once again, we have been joined with Michelle Thomas, prominent D.C. trial attorney, federal litigator, and legal analyst. Thank you so much, Michelle. Always enjoy your commentary. Thanks for coming on the Fox 5 Live Zone.
Thank you.